So welcome to Data-Driven Decision-Making in Human Services. I'm Elliot Masuda, the Events and Community Engagement Lead at Foothold Technology, and your host today. In the human services field, making the biggest impact often hinges on using data effectively. So that's why we're here today, to share some real-world strategies you can put into action. Foothold Technology is committed to empowering organizations with data, and that's why we've been busy developing new data tools in recent years. But we also know the power of learning from each other is so impactful. So this webinar is your chance to peek inside the data journey of a fellow human services organization. So joining us today is Jamie Dougherty, the Director of Data Analytics at Lakeview Health Services. So Jamie, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and Lakeview Health Services?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jamie. I've been working with Lakeview for 3 years or so now, and we're based in upstate New York. The agency is in the Finger Lakes region, and we provide a range of office and mental health supported services, mostly residential programs, as well as supportive housing, health home care management, and a handful of various programs for peer and recovery support services. We have a relatively wide geographical footprint in the Finger Lakes, which I guess is considered rural in our area. And yeah, happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah. So yeah, what I really like about this format, so we're going to have some slides to share, but it's really going to just be a conversation between me and Jamie. So to kick things off, can you describe what your agency looked like before they put data to the forefront?
Sure. So I think there was always a striving within the agency to put data at the forefront. And I will say it is a work in progress in every domain of what we do. So it's never done. But before I started with the agency, I ended up consulting with them on a project that was funded by the state. So I kind of knew them before my position was created. And at that time, they really did have a strong foundation for collaborative decision making. Agency culture is everything. That's where everything comes down from. We really work hard to make sure that people throughout the organization feel like they have their voices heard. They understand the purpose of changes. They feel involved in any changes that we're making, and ultimately feel appreciated for all the work that they do. So that's fundamental. In addition, Lakeview's always had a strong QA and compliance department and infrastructure. And we've had a committee that we call MEAG, Mission Excellence Advisory Group, that has been tasked for many years now with reviewing program data and then working with programs to develop SMART goals for the program improvement and then monitoring those goals moving forward. So that infrastructure and that's a committee that consists of people across the organization. So that's always a nice listening board and provides some accountability. And then we've had a robust consumer satisfaction survey system for a number of years. And that was actually the first project we kind of glommed onto and improved. Like, we've been collecting the data for years, but we had never trended it over time or put it into a fancy little dashboard or anything. So that was a low-hanging fruit that we worked on. So I think before my position was created, the philosophy was there. The mentality of teamwork was there. They just needed somebody with more specialized skill and time to dedicate to data work.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think that kind of some of the things you talked about with culture, hiring someone to kind of focus on that. But if you could give kind of some of the attendees or organizations 3 things they could do today to start making data work for them, what would they be?
Yes. So everybody has data one way or another. Some of the first questions I got were, what exactly is data? It's from our staff. And I've come to say it's everything you know about your job. It's everything you know about the folks you're serving and what you do in your day. Whether you wrote it down or not, it is data that we may need. Um, but most people think of it just as numbers. So we're trying to, shift the philosophy to saying it's information, not numbers, essentially. Um, so everybody has information somewhere, somehow. So the first step is to really assess where you're at. Everybody's going to be in a different place. It might help you to have like a data-minded third party or maybe a newbie in your organization, um, who can kind of think critically about some of the things you've been doing and say, why are you doing it that way? And a lot of people say, well, because we've done it for years that way. And you want to start to think outside the box a little bit and make sure what you're currently doing is kind of working for you and where the flaws are. So what information are you logging? What are you not logging? Um, Particularly, are you getting questions about information that you're not logging from your internal organization or from external partners? And just start getting a sense of, like, if you get these questions, where would you get that information? How would you obtain that information? And a lot of times the answer is we can't. And that's where you start from, and you start to build off better ways to have staff gather the information so that you can report on it. So that's the first one. And then and within that, get clear on, we all have to report to somebody, and those metrics that they're asking you for are not always super well defined. So this is the opportunity to say, hey, what do you mean by that? Are you counting hospital admissions or days in the hospital? Are you counting, like, to get really, really specific about what people are actually asking you for so that you don't have to rebuild it again later. So that's assessment. And then I think it's important to like get the big picture in mind from the start. The first thing everybody says to a data person is, I want to see everything in one place all at once. The reality is we have too much information for that to be a reality. But it's something we strive towards. And because they need, we none of us want to bounce around and log into 15 different places to find the information we need. So I don't ever promise I can put everything in one place, but we try to move towards that. So what is that going to look like? How are staff going to access that information? And because you want to make sure you have that foundational structure before you start building things, or else you're just going to keep rebuilding foundations. And then get started. Yeah, I call it kind of like iterative implementation. Pick a project, start with low-hanging fruit and stuff that people already buy in on, people already do it. How can we make it better? And start to get those kinks worked out. And they don't have to be the like most critical projects. In fact, they probably shouldn't be for your first time around. But then move on to your high priority stuff. So for example, we started with just like overhauling all of our demographic fields to make sure we were asking we had the right drop downs for race and gender and ethnicity and housing and status and education, all those things. Didn't really change much for staff except adding clarity. And we were able to go around and tell staff why we're collecting demographics, what's required, what's not. It was a nice like kind of level set before we dove into things like billing and service plans, which get much more complicated. And just part of that, find your cheerleaders.
Yeah.
As you do this work, you'll find certain people love it. Some people just think of things in this way, and some people are like, just tell me what to do. I don't want to be involved in this process. You need both of them because ultimately everybody has to do the work, but it's nice to have some cheerleaders that you can like run things by, test things out, kind of stuff. So that'll all get you started for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I think one of the big things is the data infrastructure within an organization and how they're viewing the platforms and tools they use, as well as kind of what you talked about of where are you getting this data and how are you trying to centralize it. So organizations can interact with their data in many ways. Can you go into the infrastructure you have to support data analytics at your organization? And I know I'm going to go ahead and share this.
Oh yes, we have a slide.
Slide.
Yeah, I want to get kind of specific here because I think a lot of organizations when they get started it's easy to kind of run into a wall of like technical overwhelm about deciding how you want to get this stuff set up. So I wanted to share like specific, like generally, and then specifically what we've decided on. And it's not necessarily a recommendation for anybody. It's just, shows you all the bits that we put together. But there's many options out there in this world. So the fundamental idea is, again, everybody wants things in one place. So we have already been using Microsoft for, probably decades at this point. So all of our staff have, that's all managed as part of our IT department. So we decided we wanted to stick with Microsoft and not try to integrate any other tools, both because it was cost efficient and just like helped with us keeping track of security and login and all that stuff that you have to pay attention to. So we basically have this page is basically our goal is to funnel all of the information from our different sources into Microsoft's Power BI program and then use that as the quote unquote one place where everything is. We already have 4 dashboards with many pages in them. So, but it's still on one SharePoint site in PowerPoint, or sorry, Power BI. So we post them in SharePoint and then kind of it goes through this iterative cycle of kind of anybody who needs to access that information can. We've had programs sharing it at their weekly team meetings to monitor progress as a group. We have people sharing them individually and supervision to, make sure people are keeping up with their work and if they need any support anywhere. And then of course we've got reports for QA and board and admin and other roles. So it's quickly developing, but so that's the general concept. But just to say a little bit more about like the specifics. So hardware first. When I first got this job, I have a pretty decent laptop, but it just kept crashing. Because the moment you try to do any complicated analytics, you need decent hardware. And so again, that means you also need funding. You need to be able to buy that computer. What we did was set up you basically need a computer with a lot of RAM, random access memory, and really good processing systems. There's a lot of lists you could find online just through a Google search of like what computer specs do I need for data work. But we found that so we decided to purchase a desktop PC, which is stored, it's physically secured in our IT office. And I remote into that computer and that computer stays on at all times and runs our processes overnight and whatnot. I store no PHI on my actual laptop. Everything is stored on that secured, high-powered device. So has been a really critical setup for just keeping things secure and so that things flow well. And then you need to get your data. And if you're not familiar with the term API, it stands for Application Portal Interface, I think. You'll hear it a lot in the data world. If you can get an API, it is strongly recommended. So, for example, we have purchased an API through Foothold, who's our EMR company, and they offer what they call Data Studio, and it basically gives us a automatically refreshed data feed of all of our data. So once I build the dashboard, I schedule it to refresh overnight. So every night between like midnight and 4 a.m., all of the data is updated so that when staff come in, it's there for them and they don't have to wait for me. And just having that live feed is really helpful, especially if you have limited staff, which I think most of us probably do. And then we chose to use Power BI for our actual dashboarding. I'm happy to answer questions about pros and cons of Excel versus Power BI, but basically, long story short, Power BI is more designed for this stuff. I think Excel, you can build dashboards in kind of small scale dashboard, like my personal budget is in Excel, of course, and some of our you sometimes start there with analyzing a problem. But if you're really going to build out something big, Excel doesn't scale up super well in my experience. Power BI is made for that, but they use a lot of the same terminology and language and code. So they kind of work hand in hand. So if you know somebody who's a whiz at Excel, they can probably learn Power BI relatively quickly. It's Power BI currently is $3 a month per user from Microsoft for the nonprofit price, which is hard to beat. So we decided to just purchase. So by the way, we have about 170 staff. So we're like a medium organization. And this made the most sense for us. If you have thousands of staff, they have other tiers that are more expensive and whatnot. But this made sense for us. And basically everyone needs a pro license. Eventually, once you have dashboards that you're actively sharing, but you can get started for free with Power BI. Like for the first 2 years I worked in this field, I'd never had a license that I paid for. So you can just download the desktop version of Power BI and start getting used to it. And you don't have to pay anything until you really kind of need to, until you need to publish something out to people and have them interact with it. Yeah, and like I said, that's all embedded in SharePoint, which makes it secure because our staff automatically log into like their Microsoft credentials when they log onto their computer, automatically logs them into our SharePoint. Nobody else can get in there. So we're able to fine tune who has access to what by kind of using all those resources in combination. Again, there's a lot of technical details to all of that, but I think people get swamped. And I will say that Microsoft has consultants that you can get if you're a nonprofit for free, and they will talk to you. And they think you're like the size of Walmart or, Hertz car rental or something. And so they think that you need, AI video processing and like all this really advanced analytics. I'm like, no, we just need to save text files somewhere. So you want to be clear with them that, that you probably don't need the big giant technical things that sometimes are advertised for data analytics, certainly to get started. So, and then of course we have a great relationship with Footholds, and that really helps with just understanding and processing our data. So
Yeah, that's awesome. So I do have a question, if you can go in, because not everyone is from the attendees aren't all from New York, aren't New York based. So Psyches and MAP are both state systems. Is that correct?
Yep. So Awards is Footholds EMR. So that's our primary. And Snowflake is the name of the database system that we've purchased the connection to. Psyches is run by the New York State Office of Mental Health. Basically, it's a consent-based process. So your information gets stored. If you have a mental health diagnosis and you've received mental health services, your information gets stored in or sent to Psyches. That's where they monitor a bunch of quality metrics for HEDIS and value-based payment stuff. But it does provide a lot of other information like who their PCP is and what their insurance is. And really kind of actionable, where they've been to the hospital, that kind of stuff. But it's notoriously just another place you have to log in. So we're working to pull the data out of there so that it's integrated with our awards data. So staff don't have to jump somewhere else and they can still see, hey, Psyches thinks their PCP is this guy, but you say it's this guy. Help us fix this. Thanks. And then MAP is for our health home care management program. So kind of a similar thing. It's a separate EMR. They use NetSmart statewide. So this is how we pull data out of that system. And then the ones on the left, most people are familiar with ADP probably, but we've just recently bought a connection to our HR system, and our finance system is I can also remote into and pull data from, and then RIOs are another repository of medical information. It's broader than Psyches, like all medical hospitalizations and whatnot. So there's just a lot of places to get started.
Yeah, I think I think when we were having conversations before, this was very eye-opening to me because I think when we talk to a lot of providers, I think the biggest or the two systems are either state systems or typically like their HR system,
Yeah.
because they want to be able to reconcile kind of like the delivery of services that you document in an electronic documentation system or EMR or EHR versus
Hmm.
kind of the staff logging in and out and seeing kind of how that time reconciles. I'm sure there's tons of other use cases.
Yeah,
Um,
even just a small one, my first project with our ADP system is we update our phone list manually currently. I'm gonna make it just do it automatically.
oh yeah,
And then our admin assistants don't have to do that, and it's more timely and all of that.
yeah.
Low-hanging fruit.
No, that's awesome. Um, so the next question is, and I'm sure you could probably talk for a while on this, is what challenges did you run into as you were preparing your agency to get where you were? And I'm sure there was many of them, but kind of any ones that stuck out, that might be able to either be preventable for other organizations or things that you um, think are going to be not preventable, and it's just kind of a challenge that you have to deal with and through the process.
Yeah, yeah, good question. First of all, we're all learning as we go. I work really closely with our IT director, who has just been a champ at setting up these new systems and working with me to make it all work. It really the setup that I just talked about previously probably took us about a year to figure out. That's why I like to share it with people. Um, to see the details about where someone landed in this world. Um, and then I think, Lakeview already knew this and already had the commitment to it, but it is often surprising. There's just little fees everywhere. So you need to make sure you have the budget and the finances and the staff resources allocated to do this work. It's not often super expensive, but everybody, when you try to get automatic data feeds, everybody wants you to pay them $1,000 or so a year. And if you just have to recognize that there needs to be some funds available for that. Um, and recognize that it takes a while. I think, again, Lakeview was really supportive of that, but there's only one of me at the organization, and I think I've been there 3 years, and I think the whole first year I didn't meet any program staff because I was just in my hole trying to figure out how to build everything. Now that I'm talking to staff, there's a huge demand for projects, and you need to make sure people have the you need to, well, we'll talk about this in a minute, but yeah, having somebody that's focused on data really helps make sure things actually move forward on all those projects that people want, or else they kind of bow out of the process. I think they get frustrated with nothing really changing or updating. So, um, for staff, change is hard. We all know that. So just again, it comes back to agency culture. I love people and data, which apparently is somewhat unusual. But I love training our staff, but staff do need a good amount of support. They all have my cell phone and we're residential, so we're, 24/7. So they're dealing with stuff overnight. So we just try to build a structure where we can be really supportive of staff. And two other things I'll say. Be careful of data and technical literacy. Um, people know what they are supposed to, people know what they've been taught, but a lot of times they don't necessarily feel comfortable enough with computers to stretch outside of that too far. So like, for example, we have a lot of staff who didn't know how to take a screenshot. So you gotta start with the basics. And, I would say, please send me a screenshot of the issue you're having. And that's not a thing. So, um, so we had to develop some documentation and teach them how to do that. I had somebody ask me after a meeting one time, they said, can you remind me what a percentage is? So you just want to be cognizant of the fact that people don't necessarily have the basics, I guess, and make sure you're not overwhelming them. And the last thing I'll say is when you start gathering information in a more robust way, sometimes things can look worse at first. Because you kind of notice all the holes. Like we have a random audit process, but now the computer literally tells us every problem that we have throughout the entire system. So it can be a little overwhelming and kind of shock people, but it's normal. You need a baseline to move from. So it's just I hate to see organizations get spooked by that.
Yeah, no, that's kind of I mean, that's the amazing thing of, um, yeah, it can be overwhelming, kind of everything that when you start looking behind the curtain, if you will.
Yeah, staff say, well, I know I've been doing this. If they don't do it exactly correctly, it's not really real, right? And so the computer gets very literal. So again,
Yeah.
it's not about, we definitely don't want to chastise anybody or blame or shame or anything like that. It's all just transparent information that we can use to do our work better. Like it's so I,
Yeah.
we're never striving for 100. By the way, also everybody thinks 100% is the only thing that's good. Um, so break that soon. Um,
Um, so before we kind of talk about like the why it's so essential to have kind of an individual or a team at an organization that's just focusing on data and data analytics, I thought it would be good for you to share, because just from you talking about RAM, and it seems like you come from an IT background, and that was
mhm,
very eye opening for me to, if you could just share your background and how you kind of evolved into this position, because I know that in our conversations, one of the things is that you kind of why you wanted to also speak at this or with me is you want other people to get excited about this kind of work and not think that
mhm.
they have to have an IT background. So
Yeah. So I think to the general public they think that IT people can do data and they think data people can do IT. While we do have some crossover, I am not an IT person. I do not know how to set up like security accounts or, I can plug some things in, but I'm not really great at troubleshooting and whatever. They are different roles. And I think, we're an organization of 170 staff-ish. There's one data person, there's one IT person. If either one of us had to do each other's job, IT tends to take precedence because people need to be able to get onto their computer and their computer needs to work. And so I think yeah, it's important to just, sorry, I'm blurring the questions, but it's important to have that designated role. But almost everybody I know who works in behavioral health analytics has no technical training in it, including myself. Now, that being said, obviously, like we have a nerdiness or an aptitude for computer-based things. So just my personal background, I went to undergraduate for astronomy and physics, and that's where I learned how to program. But like in C++ plus plus and stuff like that, like nothing about databases or anything. And then in some of my undergraduate and then my master's degree, I did a lot of statistics classes. When you take statistics classes, they make you learn how to program. So you just over time, I've just picked up like, you have to learn like 6 programming languages just to do the work that you did, even though you're not a programmer. Um, and I've just been able to translate that into all of this. I technically don't have any training in, dashboard design or data infrastructure. I've read some books on relational databases and that kind of stuff, and I enjoy it. But I have friends in this field who are like they kind of cut their chops because they're really into gaming, so they got good at programming and like modifying games and things like that. And now they're behavioral health data analysts because they just got into it. So, I do just caution people like if you post a position or something in this world, I think it's more about what people's past experience has been, what kind of projects they've done before, what their philosophy is, and how they think about this stuff. Obviously, a degree is great, but it more the proof is in the pudding of like what they've actually done in their workplaces.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so kind of continuing on to around um, why it's essential to have an individual or team that's focusing on these efforts. And maybe also just telling, because you talked about how you consulted first, maybe how an organization could get to hiring someone, but it's still, even whether they're consulting or on staff, it seems like they need someone that is kind of purely focusing on this.
Yeah, so before I officially worked for Lakeview, I did a lot of like kind of consulting for multiple organizations, and I just really think it's important to have somebody that's consistent and internal because these projects take a long time. Sometimes, and just change takes time, and you know, you need to be able to see the big picture. And when you're a consultant, you just kind of make recommendations and people either do them or they don't. And if you're not there, especially for like building dashboards, unless you're going to somehow, I remember trying to train some of my colleagues to take over the dashboard building on that project, and it's just not how their brains tick. They were overwhelmed. It's a specialized skill set that um you know, random people in your organization probably won't just pick up or want to do. Um, so you got to find the ones that do like to think that way, and just make sure that, you know, like I'm part of the QA team, which I think is also really important because then I get to bother my QA colleagues about all the little details about how we label things and what the regulations are. And so I have people to bounce questions off of, even though I'm the only technical data person. Everybody provides support. I'm hoping
Yeah.
that answers your question.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I think that I want to make sure that we can share some of the wins that you're seeing at your organization that you've
Sure.
created. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. And this is kind of, we'll go through and kind of, I'll let you take it from here about kind of what the wins that you've seen at your organization.
Yeah. So we put these slides together in like November. So this is a little old, but so this we've developed this even more since then. So one of the first things, one of the main things our residential teams have to do is make sure that there are enough notes of the right type in the system for us to be able to process billing. Um, and they have to check so many things. They have to be 15-minute face-to-face, 4 different service types on 4 different dates in a month. And there's just all these rules. And frankly, whenever there's a bunch of rules, the computer should do it for you, because it can, and it saves people time and catches mistakes. So this is one of the first iterations of that we put together and basically said, each row here is a person on the left side here, which I took their names out, obviously. And if they haven't gotten enough notes in for the month, it's red. And when they get enough notes in for the month, it turns green. Nice and simple for them. It also shows how many other notes they wrote. Like if you look at the one at the bottom, this person had 117 notes. So that's just shocking, right? And so you can dig into why. And so I'm not sure which row I clicked on for the second screenshot on the right, but when you click on any one row, it shows you all the note details. So you can see, oh, we'd had a bunch of 5-minute or 0-minute notes because they were just about people coming down and taking their medications. We also have a 725-minute note, which is 12 hours, which says, hey, program manager, somebody put AM or PM wrong in the note. We were not actually probably with them for 12 hours, so let's go correct that. So it's meant to be more proactive and help them kind of monitor where people are at in the month, and catch little things that are hard to catch just from scrolling through a progress note list, like AM PM mix up.
Yeah. Should I go to the
Yeah,
next
you can go to the
one?
next one. And then so that was at an individual level. Like person by person, do they have, what is their data? And then I always suggest think about how you're going to show improvement over time whenever you build anything. So most of our teams don't look at these. Sometimes they're thinking more person to person. The person in front of me needs XYZ. But over the course of a year and QI, quality improvement efforts, we need to be able to demonstrate change. So we basically produce this off of that data that says, all right, how many people had their 4 notes of the right type each month? So that we can see if there's dips, we can see if there's improvement and all of that. And the example on the bottom is our shining example. We had a non-billable program, so they didn't have these expectations necessarily, but we started implementing them in like summer last year. So you can see in the graph just how quickly they took up this effort, and kind of where the gaps were and where they're at. So they were really proud of this. They shared it in team meetings, and the team was really excited to see their progress. And I think that's a really key point. You don't want to always be pointing out what you're missing. You want to show them, look at this. This is great, So we're really happy that they were proud of it.
And is that the graph below, is that from using the previous graph as like that was what the team was monitoring to make sure that they were, something
Yeah, the
like
previous
that?
page. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So they would see, okay, I got my 4 in, I got my 4 in, but then now we aggregate it over time and say, look, you're doing better than you've ever done. This is awesome,
Yeah. I think that, I've had so many conversations with providers about that and like celebrating those wins, right?
Yeah.
To the team and getting the buy-in for the staff to be like, oh, this is impacting our whole organization by all of us being kind of compliant or keeping up with our notes and all of that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And then this one's interesting because we're a largely residential agency. People stay with us we have pretty long lengths of stay, often years. And we work with folks with serious mental illness who have struggled for many years before coming to us. And so we do this assessment called the DLA 20, which assesses their independent living skills in 20 different areas. And staff have been doing that for years, 4 times a year. But they really only looked at the most recent one when they like updated a service plan or something. So now we've been able to pull all that information over the years, like this one goes back to 2021, and show them the data, show them the average, show them if people are improving. And then the graph on the bottom, the darker boxes are higher scores, so more independent. So you can quickly see at a glance that this person's pretty good with their housing stability and their safety and their community resources and behavior, but they're really struggling, and they have been consistently, with managing time and money and alcohol, drug use, and other things. So it's just a quick glance of people's progress and areas of strengths and weakness. That's a very data-driven thing. So they were excited to see it in this format as well. And then if you go to the next slide, I'll just say real quick, this is an individual. And then the next slide, we did the whole program. So we could see on average, if you look at the productivity column 15, we can see which programs are having, the most struggles with productivity. So that if we wanted to implement some kind of training program or events or other supports for our residents, then we kind of know where to target it. So these are just some of the first things that we did. And again, building off of stuff that we were already doing, really. And just trying to give them back the information in a way that makes their jobs easier.
Yeah, and I like how you touched on the color coding to make it like more digestible, and seeing that as it gets like darker, it gets closer to kind of the more independence or more success.
Yeah. Yeah, colors are real important, but be careful. If you turn something red, people think it's bad, so just be careful.
And I think this is the last slide in this,
Yes,
right?
I think so.
Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. So we have just a few more minutes. I'm gonna kind of open it up to see if people have questions. And then as we'll answer any of those if there's any questions that come in. But really just also, Jamie, thank you for doing this. I think it really gave a lot of insight around your organization and how you've approached kind of being data driven. So thank you again. And just wanted to give you an opportunity if there's anything that you think we haven't covered in 3 minutes that you can share.
I'll just share my most exciting thing, and I think Elliot and I talked about this previously. That originally these projects were like almost like me imposing changes on staff, being like, "Come on, guys, we gotta, you're doing this already. Let's make it work better for you." And lately, I'm getting a lot of requests, which means that the culture is shifting. People are thinking about how we can do things better. They're understanding how we can use our tools better to make their jobs more efficient. So, although my project list is growing, so is my group of cheerleaders and champions who are starting to dissect things on their own and then come back to me and say, "Hey, can we do this? Can we do it this way?" And that's just really exciting for me that the
Yeah.
buy-in is awesome. But it's been a long road. It's been 3 years
Yeah,
to
no.
really feel that it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, that's a testament to the work that you're doing. And I think just even from the glimpse of what we got, it shows the impact of your organization. So keep up the work.
Yeah. It's
Good
not
work.
just about reporting. That's the fundamental thing I'll say. Everybody thinks you're just there to like provide reports to the county. It has to be so much more than that. It's about helping your staff do what they signed up for. They didn't sign up to fill out forms. They signed up to work with folks on their wellness. So
Yeah. Well, and I think kind of those last couple slides, like that's what I was saying, is like you're seeing actually the impact that you're doing
yeah,
on to the individuals, or like if people need more support, or you're
yep,
just identifying how you can better support the individuals you serve, the community. And I mean, that's why all of the providers that we work with, that's what they're there for,
yeah,
why they show up every day.
exactly.
So we don't have any other questions coming in. Again, I think we'll just close out, and thank you so much, Jamie, for your time today. The webinar is recorded, so we'll follow up with all of our registrants with a recording. And thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
good one. Bye.
Bye.